In the previous class, we had a discussion about task synchronization issues. So we found two concepts. One it is racing, another one is deadlock. So we discussed in the previous class those two concepts in task synchronization issues. In today's session, we discuss about the concept of semaphores. So what is this semaphore? Semaphore is a sleep and wake up based mutual exclusion implementation for shared resource access. So it is nothing but whenever the shared resources are accessed by n number of tasks in the system, there we are going to observe the concept of sleep and wake up based mutual exclusion. Nothing but whenever a task is using any shared resource, during that time, if another task required same shared resource, then either of two, one is going to sleep, means it is going to withhold its work, and it is going to allocate, means it is going to allocate whatever the shared resource to the important task. So here, after that completion of that process, it is while ending its task, it is going to share, means it is going to return its shared resource to that respective task. So here, sleep nothing but is going to temporarily stop the processing, and it is going to sleep mode. It is going to sleep mode. After that, how it is going to overcome from that sleep mode? Whatever the shared resource is shared between two processes, the one which is made another process sleep, it is going to generate an acknowledgement saying that yes, the task is completed. You can come out from that sleep mode, means wake up. So wake up signal will be generated by the task completed process. So this is one type of this concept is nothing but the semaphores. So based on implementation of sharing limitations of shared resource, based on the limitations, obviously we have some limitations for sharing the resources, because based on the priority or based on the scheduling, and we went through all those task scheduling concepts. So based on that one, here the sharing limitations, the semaphores are classified into two, namely the binary semaphore, another one is the counting semaphores. So what are these two concepts? Let us go for what is this counting semaphores. So by seeing the example, the day-to-day life example, yes, you will get the knowledge about what is this semaphore. Okay, nothing but the sharing resource, how the concept is given based on mutual exclusion. So here it is, the counting semaphore. The counting semaphore limits the access of resources by a fixed number of processes or a thread. So what this one is going to do, this semaphore is going to do, it is going to limit the access of resources by a fixed number of processes or a thread. Means in the system, if this concept is adopted, so the counting semaphores, then there is a limit for accessing the resources for fixed number of tasks. Means if I say in the computer, in the laptop, if the screen is shared between number of applications, because the application, the web browser also need the screen for display purpose, as well as the desktop application. It is also need the screen for its applications. So while processing, all tasks are running, all threads are running simultaneously or concurrently. How the system is going to share its resources? Based on limits. What is the limit in the counting semaphores? Here it is going to limit for a fixed number of processes. Means the screen is shared between only one or two applications, not to all. It is not permitted to give to all. So after completion of that one, once again, if any slot is free, then the screen is shared to next number, like that. State of counting semaphores object is set to signaled. Means after we have how we need to monitor, yes, the access of these resources is available in the counting semaphores. All resources are allocated, or is there any resource left free? So based on that one, some signaling concepts, we are going to say those are the objects which are going to represent the status of this counting semaphores. The state of the counting semaphores object. So we are going to have one object. So that object is set to signaled. Since we are going to give a signal, means the signal nothing but it is set to some value, signaled, and the counting of the object is greater than 0. The counting of the object is greater than 0. So if we observe that object, if we want to know what is the value in that semaphore object, if it is returned signaled. Signal means what? Yes, the count is available. Count of the object is greater than 0. Greater than 0 nothing but what? Yes, the shared resources are available for accessing that process, to access that, accessed by that particular process. This greater than 0 nothing but yes, systems are available for access. That's it. The count associated with the semaphores object is decremented by 1 and process or a thread acquires. Means what? If I say yes, at initial stage the counting semaphore is going to say 10 for display resource. So screen is available for 10 processes, 10 applications. Means what? That semaphore object is signaled as 10. So whenever a process is going to occupy that screen shared resource, then what will be the count number? Out of 10, if 1 is occupied, okay, it is decremented by 1. 2 processes are occupied, it is decremented by 2. Means what? Out of 10, 2 are already using, remaining 8 slots are free. Like that. So the semaphore object is decremented by 1 and a process or a thread acquires it. And the count is incremented by 1 when a process releases the semaphore object, obviously. When it is using the semaphore object is decremented by 1 and it is released. Means after completion of the process, obviously that thread is going to release that object because it is nowhere used in future. So it is going to release that one. Release nothing but what? Yes, it is become free. Become free nothing but the object value is incremented by 1. Like that. The state of semaphore object is, say, non-signaled. Non-signal nothing but it may be any value. It may be 0 or it may be null. And the semaphore acquired by the maximum number of processes or a thread that the semaphore can support. So semaphore is supported for some set of fixed number of processes. Once all processes are occupied that semaphore object, then the object is labeled as it is non-signaled. It is set to non-signal. It indicates whatever the count it has supporting, all limit is over. The real world example for the counting semaphore concept is dormitory system for accommodation. Dormitory system for accommodation means what? In a single room, in a single hall, let's say there are 10 beds for 10 people to occupy, 10 beds for occupation of 10 members, 10 person, obviously. So this is nothing but what? That complete hall is one semaphore object. That complete hall is semaphore object. If no one occupied any bed, obviously what is the count in the semaphore object? It is 10. So 10 shared resources means beds are available in that dormitory, in that hall. So if any one person start using, means he is going to enter by taking the permission, all the processes, what is going to happen? The bed is allocated for that particular person. So what is the semaphore object count now? 10. It is used by one process, so it will be decremented as we are observing here. So it is decremented by 1 when any process or a thread is going to acquires it. So how many beds are left in that hall? 9. So the value of that semaphore object is 9. Then if anyone once again acquire any bed, what is going to happen? Obviously the count of this semaphore object is gone decreasing. Once it is full, once all beds are allocated, acquired by all 10 persons, then obviously the semaphore object is going to say non-signaled. No empty bed. Beds are not available, like that, non-signaled. And beds are available, we say the semaphore object for that particular example, dormitory system, we say it is going to be signaled, means beds are available. And all beds are filled, we say it is non-signaled, nothing but no bed is available, like that. Then another example it is, we go for that same example itself. So 10 beds are in single hall, or one bed in one hall or one room. Means what? It is a lodge. The lodge system, what we are going to observe, it is nothing but the binary semaphore. Means available of resources. How they are made available. 10 beds are a single room or one bed in one room, means 10 rooms. So it is another example, it is the lodge system, it is comes under the binary semaphore. So another name of this one is mutex. The binary semaphore provides exclusive access to shared resource by allocating the resource to a single process. Means what? Only one bed in one room. So how many persons they are going to allocate it? They can access that bed. Only one person. Here also, the shared resource is allocated to a single process at a time. Single process at a time, and not allowing the other process to access it. Means in the lodge, if one room is already allocated, so the same room is not going to allocate it for another person. Same way. But what about in the dormitory system? If number of beds are free, until unless the number of beds are free, all beds are allocated on first come, first serve basis. Isn't it? Then any process or a thread can create a mutex object, means that binary semaphore object, and other process threads of the system can use this mutex object for synchronizing the access to critical sections. Means one process is want to use that particular shared resource, then it is going to generate its mutex object. So once it is generated, it is left to that particular process. It may release that one based on the critical section, critical issues with another process, or based on the priority based processes. It may use that particular mutex object. Only one process or a thread can own the mutex object at a time. Obviously, the binary semaphore is occupied by only one process at a time. The state of mutex object is set to signal when it is not owned by any process. Means if it is free, if that object is free, it is going to say, yes, the resource object is free, nothing but the resource is free. Yes, the shared resource is free, then the mutex object is going to say this signaled. When it is not owned by any process, and it is set to non-signaled when it is owned by any process. When it is occupied by, means that shared system is utilized by one process, then the mutex object is going to say non-signaled, means it is not available. It is already under use. Like a real world example of this one is the lodging system, what we have discussed. Means in the hotel accommodation system. hotel accommodation system, that is nothing but lodging system. We are going to observe such environment. One person, one room. Means one room is accommodated by only one user. If any user comes, yes, the key. Mutex object is nothing but a key, room key. If no one is using, so mutex object is free. Key is not handed over to anybody. It is totally free. If any person using that particular room in the lodge, obviously the key is available with that person. Key is available with that person. Nothing but in the system, if the shared resource is used by any process, then the mutex object is non-signaled. Non-signaled, it is not available. Signaled, it is available. So these are the few concepts about the counting semaphores and binary semaphores. The next concept is based on all these discussions. What is the real-time operating system? What is the general purpose of the operating system? What are the task communication? Okay, what is the kernel? What are the responsibilities of that kernel? How it is going to perform time management, the task scheduling management, how it is going to have task communication and task synchronization. So having all these discussions, a question comes then how to choose RTOS, because in the RTOS we are going to find all these facilities. All these facilities available in the RTOS, because the real-time kernel is performing all what concepts what we have discussed in the earlier sessions. Now the question comes how to choose a RTOS. The decision of choosing an RTOS for an embedded design is a little bit crucial. Since we're going to find difficulties to make a decision, I need to choose this particular real-time operating system. A lot of factors needs to be analyzed carefully before making a decision on selection of the respective RTOS. These factors can be either functional or non-functional, because we went through the operating and non-operating behavior, the characteristics, the functions of this RTOS or this particular kernel. So based on that one, how either it is a functional based or non-functional based RTOS. If I go for the requirements for the functional factor, here we are going to find whatever the RTOS, it is processor support, it needs memory requirements. We need to think about the real-time capabilities of that particular RTOS. What are kernel and its interrupt latency, inter-process communication, how the inter-process communication is going to happen, how well it is going to have the task synchronization, how the RTOS is going to support multiple processes, and how all the resources, the shared resources are well utilized by each process, because it is a real time. Okay, then comes the task synchronization. After that, it is modularization, support, then support for networking and communication, because how in the network, if it is that embedded system, it is kept, the RTOS, it is kept in the network, how it is going to support the network and how it is going to perform the communication. Not only inter-process communication as well as the network communication, how well it is going to execute. Then development language support. So which language it is going to support? It is a user-friendly or not? So these are some functional requirements we need to observe while making a decision to choose a RTOS. In the category of non-functional requirements, we have the custom developed or off-the-shelf. Since we can have the customized development or not. Then comes the cost. Obviously, in the non-functional requirement, obviously the cost is going to be effective one. Obviously, the user think about the minimum cost, maximum performance. By that, real-time operating system, the development and debugging tools available. If I choose any RTOS, whether it is going to support the future developments or not only or, and the debugging tools, are they available for that RTOS? And another main non-functional requirement it should be ease of use. It is readily available for usage. And we need to go for after sales. So after sales, what is the functionality of this RTOS? So these are the some functional and non-functional requirements while making a decision to choose a RTOS for design of an embedded system. So this is about the design of embedded system. It may be firmware or a hardware design concepts. Then comes, yes, we have a design is ready. Then how to develop that one? How to integrate? Development is also over. Then how we need to integrate and test that particular hardware or a firmware. How to? A variety of techniques are used for embedding the firmware into a target board. Hence, once the software is ready, the chip is ready with the software. So how we need to keep that one in the target board? Since the Intel processor is ready. So how to transfer that one to lab to the motherboard? How we need to install it? So we have various technologies. Here we are going to find out of that programming. You are going to do what we are touching here, we are discussing here. We are discussing about how to transfer the embedded firmware into the target board. So one of the technology it is out of circuit programming. Another one is in-system programming, ISP we are going to mention. Another one is in-application programming, IAP. So these are the hierarchies. Okay. In the beginning stages, obviously everything is done on out of circuit programming only. After that, based on some implementation in the hardware and firmware, or in the implementation in the technology, we found some more technologies like in-system programming. Then comes, if I go for example, you will understand what are these concepts. In application programming, the use of factory programmed chips. Another one is the firmware loading for operating system based devices. So these are the few techniques used for embedding the firmware into target board. So what is this out of circuit programming? Out of circuit programming performed outside the target board. Outside the target board. So in the digital lab, in the LD lab, you have used trainer kits. You have used trainer kits. So the sockets, what are available in that trainer kit? So that is one of the example of this environment technique. So what we are going to do, so if I want to, in the motherboard, there is a processor. Okay, so that firmware, that chip is there. So how I need to program it or how I need to create it. So instead of in the motherboard only, directly I am not going to put that one, that particular chip, the firmware in that motherboard. Then I am going to use that motherboard for installing all the or the creating that particular firmware. So what we are going to do here in this out of circuit program, nothing but the chip, what it is there, the embedded firmware it is there, it is going to be out of the circuit. It is programmed out of the circuit. So here what we are going to, we are going to use the same technology what it is there in the trainer kit environment. The trainer kit itself is the one of the examples. So what we are going to do, we are going to, whatever the firmware we want to design, we want to program. So that chip is removed from the circuit board, that is motherboard or a target board. It is removed, then it is kept on another board, another separate board, and that separate board is a development board, development kit we say. It is a development kit. In that development kit, we are going to observe that socket type hardware. So we are going to put that or keep that one chip in that particular socket. Then we are going to connect that development kit to the respective embedded firmware environment. Then using the inter communication buses or the network buses, we are going to connect both devices, the programming environment plus the target chip, the firmware development kit. So this environment is known as out of circuit programming. It is performed outside the target board. You can observe here, whatever the discussion it is, yes, the PC is there, which is used for programming. Here in the PC, we are going to observe the input-output ports and the programmer is available. And whatever the program, that development kit, where we are going to install this firmware, that chip for development purpose. And we're going to connect these two devices using this bus structure. RS-232 or USB cable, we are going to connect between PC and this device programmer. So whatever the program it is there, it is written in the programmer, then it is dumped in this particular chip, which is available in another outside this PC, outside this PC, or we may say the target board. And through this IO ports, once the chip is ready, once again we are going to install that chip in this target board. So this is the method adopted in out of circuit programming. The processor or a memory chip into which the firmware needs to be embedded is taken out of the target board, and it is programmed with the help of another environment, another kit that is known as programming device. The in-system programming. So here the operations uses by this ISP, the target device. In most cases, the target device is the microprocessor or a microcontroller. The target device should be powered up in a special ISP mode. So whatever the firmware we want to dump in a particular chip, so that will be done through this within the system. So ISP mode allows, means we are going to make that particular target board settings as ISP mode. The ISP mode allows the device to communicate with an external host through a serial interface, such as PC or terminals. The device receives commands and data from the host, erases and reprograms code memory according to the received command. Means the upgradation or any edit of operations will be done through this command. Once the ISP operation are completed, the device is reconfigured so that it will operate normally by applying a reset or a repower concept. Once the programming or execution or editing, the erasing or adding data nothing but the program, the firmware, what we want to embed it in the particular chip. So those things will be after, means we are going to set the target board conditions are ISP mode. In application programming is a technique used by the firmware running on a target device for modifying a selected portion of a code memory. So first thing is what? We are going to dump the software in the chip using PC and development kit, the programming device. And both devices are connected through one cable. So that is nothing but what? Out circuit concept, out of circuit. Then another technology, it is implemented as ISP, the in-system programming. No need to remove that chip and keep it that chip in the another device, connect that device and program it, then remove that device, remove that chip and dump in the target board. That is out of circuit. We are not following that one. That is implemented by ISP. What is the next concept? In the ISP, we are once again reconfiguring. We are reconfiguring that chip, resetting that chip, or modifying the program in that chip within this target board. Within the target board, the condition what we are going to keep it is ISP mode for burning the software in that particular chip. Once the burning is over, chip is ready, so ISP mode is released. Once again, the system is running as usual, normally. Another technique, it is in-application programming. So here we are not changing if any updates are there, if any erase concept is there in the particular model of the program, So what we are doing here, in-application programming means we are not removing the complete, we are not erasing complete memory of the chip, code memory of the chip. We are only removing which part we want to remove, which module we want to remove. So that is nothing but in-application programming, modifying a selected portion of a code memory. No need to remove all the code. Remove only required. That is in-application programming. So it modifies the program code memory under the control of embedded application. So updating calibration data, lookup table, EDC, which are stored in code memory are typical example of IAP. So whatever the table we want to update, the data we want to update. Okay, so those things will be done through this technique in application programming. The use of factory programmed chip. It is possible to embed the firmware into the target processor or a controller memory at the time of chip fabrication itself. So no need to go for any, it is like a use and throw concept. Use of factory programmed chip. No facility of what? The rewriting the programs in that particular chip. So whatever it is built from the fabrication sector itself. Once the firmware design is over, the firmware achieved operational stability and the firmware files can be sent to the chip fabricator to embed it into the code memory. So whatever the required concept is there, required functioning of that particular firmware is there. So those respective files means code are sent to the factory. So factory is going to receive those 4 files, and those programs are kept in that, stored in that particular chip. So it is a factory-based chip. So factory program chips are convenient for mass production wherever we need mass production. Obviously, whatever the processor, the laptop processor or desktop processor, the Intel processors, what we are going to use regular day in all the motherboards, those are factory-based, factory programmed chips. So factory programmed chips are convenient for mass production applications and it greatly reduces the product development time. So it is not recommended to use a factory programmed chips for development purpose where the firmware undergoes frequent changes. Wherever we are going to observe, we need a change. Obviously, it is not possible in such chips. So it is not recommended for such environments. The firmware loading for operating system based devices. the OS-based embedded systems are programmed using the in-system programming. Obviously, one of the example it is, if I say, instead of particular this the chip, the Intel processors, it may be processor or a controller, those are using the technique of in-system programming based on operating system. So whenever we are installing any application in this particular laptop or a desktop, what we are doing? We are modifying the code memory in that particular chip. The OS-based embedded systems contain a special piece of code called bootloader program which takes control of the OS and application firmware embedding and copying of OS image to RAM of the system for execution. So we are going to observe in this OS based, we may go for cloning of OS from one system to, so it is used for what? Loading the firmware in the respective system. So one of the example it is cloning what we are going to do in the copying operating system from one system to another system without any modification. If we want the exact operating system in another PC or a laptop, we are going to use this technique, the firmware loading for operating based devices. Then it is the embedded system development environment. So we come across how to develop, what are the facilities to create one firmware and how to dump it in a for chip. So we went through some technologies. Then if we discuss about the embedded system development environment, here in embedded system development context, the integrated development environment, IDE we are going to refer, stands for an integrated environment for developing and debugging the target processor specific embedded firmware. So we are going to use some integrated development environment, that is IDE for development of such firmware. So IDE is a software package which bundles, it is combination of, it has a text editor in that particular software. It is a bundle of text editor for source code editing, cross compiler, it has a compiler for cross-platform developments and compiler for same platform developments. It has both cross compilers and compilers based on the requirement or which type of firmware we are interested to design. We have the concept like linkers and debuggers. Linker, debugger, compiler, and a text editor. So this is the bundle what we are going to observe in the complete software package which is used for developing a embedded system firmware. In embedded applications, the IDE is either supplied by the target controller manufacturer or by third-party vendors, or it may be open source. Example, it is MATLAB. What we are going to use for discussing or processing embedded systems. So whatever the code for the respective is built, developed, and it is compiled. It may be for same platform, or it may be for different platform by using cross compiler. And after that one, it is going to use the linker, and debugging is also there in that particular MATLAB software only. We are going to write the program, we are going to test that program, and we are going to debug that errors. And finally, we come across what? Yes, the system is, the software is ready, the firmware is ready. What is the left work? It is just dump that software in the respective chip. That is one of the examples is MATLAB. The Keil software, what we are going to use in current ARM or embedded labs. the Keil software, it is useful. That is because it is going to support the embedded C. Then we have for Android mobiles, Android firmware. It is designed using Android Studio. The APK file, how we are going to create that one? It is using Android Studio for Arduino. We are familiar with this Arduino. So all these software, the complete package means we are going to write the programs in that particular IDE. We are going to test it. We are going to debug it, and we make that one ready to store or burn in the respective processor or a controller chip. And some other example we're going to find in the example of integrated development environment, IDE. So here, there are some more concepts with respect to the assemblers, compilers, and this development environment, what it is having. Not only these, it is also having the disassembler. What is this disassembler? It is just opposite work of that assembler. So what is the assembler performance? Assembler is going to convert assembly level language to machine level language. So is utility program which converts reverse machine code to target processor specific assembly code or a instruction. Reverse operation of that assembler. What assembler is going to do? Convert assembly to machine. What this assembler is going to do? It is going to convert machine to assembly code. And while converting, while using this disassembler, we need to specify which type of assembly code or which processor or which controller we are going for this conversion. Okay, because the 8086 microprocessor need different codes. Then, if I go for above, higher end, the Pentium, we are going to have, but at the end of the day, whatever the machine code it is unique. For this assembler, we are going to find difficulty to conversion. I have a machine code. How to which processor I need to convert it? So we need to specify while performing this assembly. We need to specify which processor or a controller we are having this disassembly concept. Similarly, the decompiler is the utility program for translating machine code into, once again, it is corresponding respective high-level language instructions. So it is only one method, conversion from C to machine, C++ to machine, compiler or a cross compiler. But reverse is the difficult thing, because whatever the C code or C++, Java or anything high-level language, those are, if once we convert into, all are converted into only zeros and ones language. That is machine code. In that particular file, we are going to find only the combination of strings of zeros and ones. Now, the task is how to convert that machine code into the particular language, whether it is supported by or not. So here, while performing decompiler, we need to take care of mentioning which corresponding or respective high-level language it should be converted. So decompiler performs both the reverse operations of compiler and cross compiler. Here in the embedded system development environment, we are going to find simulators, emulators, and debuggers. Simulators is a software tool used for something but the IDE what we are discussing here. The software which is used for developing such software or a firmware used for simulating the various conditions for checking the functionality of the application firmware. So it is used for simulation, simulating the various conditions for checking the functionality of the application firmware. So if I go for the MATLAB, in the MATLAB it is simulator. What we are simulating there? So I want to check the noise in the received signals. How we are testing this one? through programming. So we are not directly writing the program and dumping that one into the chip, and we are not testing that chip. How we are performing that one? By simulating. So how it is? It is done through checking the functionalities of the application firmware. So we are checking through graphical representation. So signal 1 is there, signal 2 is there. If I mix that signal, if I am going to send that one, I am going to create the signal and I am going to receive the signal, then what is the noise ratio? So all these calculations done within that software only. Once the testing is over, we are going to dump that program in the respective chip. So simulators simulate the target hardware, and the firmware execution can be inspected using the simulators. Emulator. Emulator is a hardware device which emulates the functionalities of the target device and allows real-time debugging of the embedded firmware in a hardware environment. It is a hardware device which emulates the functionalities of the target device. Example is Android Studio. That software is going to allow you not only simulation, it is not a simulator actually, it is an emulator. We are going to give the name as emulator because whatever the device you are designing, whatever the application you are creating, APK file, okay, Android application, what you are creating, designing for a particular mobile phone, and that target device, that particular mobile phone is virtually available in that software. You can view that image, and also you can test that software using that virtual mobile phone. That image, hardware image, whatever is observed in Android Studio. Or went through these things, so obviously they come to know, yes, simulator is nothing but what? It is going to check without the help of the image of hardware, where the target device. What is in the emulator? The target is available in that software itself, the virtual target device. So wherever the application we are creating, no need to create in the Android Studio, in the Android application. So what we are going to do in that emulator, we are going to write the programs, we are going to test it, and we are going to store it in the virtual device, and we are going to debug. Once we are going to have in a single software, we are going to perform all the tasks. Once it is okay, yes, we are going to create the application, then we are going to store, we are going to send it for loading in the target actual hardware devices. Okay. Then comes the debugging. Debugging is the process of diagnosing the firmware execution, monitoring the target processor, registers, and memory while the firmware is running, and checking the signals from various buses of the embedded hardware. So debugging is the process of diagnosing the firmware execution, not only firmware execution, the monitoring of the target processor registers, the memory content, what is going on in the memory contents, how the data is moving, how the upgradation is there. All these things we can check each signal in this debugging concept. It is a process. So what are the debugging techniques we are going to have? It is an incremental EEPROM burning technique, inline breakpoint based firmware debugging, monitor program based firmware debugging, in-circuit emulator ICE based firmware debugging, on-chip firmware debugging, OCD VRC. So these are the some debugging techniques, how we are going to debug the embedded firmware. How we are going to create that embedded firmware by using simulator or emulator. Okay, simulator is nothing but simulation of that particular target board application. What about emulator? Emulator is a hardware device which emulates. Means the virtual target device is available in that software itself. Emulator. Then debugging, how we are going to perform the diagnosing of the firmware execution, the monitoring of memory and register contents, and checking the signals by various bus used in the embedded hardware. That is, in the next class we discuss about what is this debugging technique. Okay.